I'm Bruce Shopper, I'm the general manager of the fairgrounds. I'm turning
Yeah,
over to Bob
we're allowed.
Lexman, and he's going to have a few remarks and then turn it over to Curtis.
Yeah. You all don't want to sit down somewhere?
Easier said than done, really.
So I'm Bob Reckman. I'm the city councilor for Ward 3 and a member of the, by virtue of being a member of the city council, a member of the Three-County Fair Redevelopment Committee. I was the president of the Ward 3 Neighbor Association for 3 years and was a principal player in the Meadows land use plan in 2001. I've loved the fair since I moved here in 1978. The end of flat track racing about 5 years ago meant the fair had to create a new economic model. One part of that is events such as the Paradise City Arts Festival, and a number of equestrian events such as the New England Morgan Horse Show, which is happening across the street tonight, and which is why we are confined to these cramped quarters. The board of directors of the fair had a feasibility study done, which showed that there is a strong market for general purpose exhibition and display space in this part of Massachusetts. Since the fair is not used much from October through April, the feasibility the report recommended construction of a 100,000 square foot conference and exhibition building. That's a key component of the new fair. It will bring more traffic to the fair, but the bulk of the new users will come during the fall, winter, and spring when the grounds are underused. The new users will help pay for the improvements we will hear about tonight, and will also spend money on food and lodging and gasoline and other things in our community. The purpose of tonight's evening, in this evening's meeting, is to hear about the master plan and developed by Bullock Smith Partners and be presented by Mr. Curtis Catron here, who is overseeing the entire process. Catron. Sorry. There was a very successful neighborhood meeting in June, which many of you attended, and where you offered your opinions on things that were important to you about the new Three-County Fair. Your thoughts were heard, and you will see many of them reflected in this master plan tonight. The master plan has been approved by the Redevelopment Committee and the Board of Directors. A master plan simply shows how the property will be used in principle.
Who was it approved by? The master plan was approved by?
Both the Redevelopment Committee and the Board of Directors of the fair. A master plan simply shows how the property will be used in principle. It shows building locations, walkways, barns, warm-up and show rings, the midway, and other key components that were part of the program developed by the Fair Board in conjunction with Bullock Smith Partners. It does not include any E-code architectural drawings of actual buildings. Those will happen once we have raised the necessary funds for the architectural engineering plans, and this is simply the first step towards that in that process. The Redevelopment Committee and the Fair Board asked Bullock Smith Partners to look at different options for the new buildings at the fair that the fair needs to continue to enrich our lives. They provided 3 options for the new exhibition building location. The option that was chosen puts the new exhibition building at the rear of the fair property on Cross Path Road near the intersection with Fair Street and Ventures Field Road. It also proposes making Old Ferry Road be 3 lanes at Bridge Street with a dedicated left turn lane onto Bridge Street. And another virtue of that location is it provides adequate place for people who are waiting to park. They'll be able to be in line on Old Ferry Road and on Cross Path Road before they get to the parking lots and the other layouts had real traffic flow problems. We hope that you're happy with the master plan. A lot of work is going to do it in a short period of time. You remember, we hired this gentleman 10 weeks ago, perhaps?
Something like that.
That's right. So I'm going to turn it over to Curtis, and when he's done, the meeting will be open for questions and comments from the public. Mr. Catron, please.
Well, it's good to see everybody again. It's amazing how quickly the time went by, but how much we got done in all that time. If you go to the next slide, if you'll reach behind that white door, there's 2 light switches. I want you to just turn off the one that's closest to the door. I'm not going to turn the middle one off because everybody goes to sleep. I can't see them to wake them back up. As you probably recall, and if anyone has any questions about details, we can come back to them later, but as you recall, we had our very first meeting here we included a public meeting with you people to get input on your concerns about the fair, what you would like to see, and your general thoughts. On top of that, we interviewed several other people, but I talked to you about our process, and that was, the kickoff was to do the analysis of the existing facility and do all our fact finding. After we got that information, I went back to Knoxville, Tennessee. We developed 3 or 4 concepts, brought those, reviewed them with the development committee and the fair board. A choice was made. We were supposed to take that back and refine it, but the reason why the choice was made was because of failures of some of those designs. And so, working with Berkshire Design Group, we decided we'd revisit several of those. And when we came back, we actually presented 3 different preferred concepts so that we could make sure we were making the correct decision. We presented those, and the same design was selected, and then we wrapped up the entire master plan. Now, that was the process. This was approved yesterday. The approval we got was from yesterday. So we naturally set up the meeting to show you what happened. If we go to the next thing, I'm going to review all of this stuff very quickly. By the way, I have to leave here by 8 o'clock to go pick my wife up at the airport because I, with very little persuasion, got her to agree to come here to spend the rest of the week with me because I've enjoyed coming here so much. So we look forward to playing in the rain the whole weekend. So the analysis phase, if you'll go through this. We started with the economic study, as you recall, an 80,000 square foot concrete floor exhibition building, pretty large building. We need to renovate the existing arena building, have at least 775 stalls available for a typical large horse show. The Morgan Horse Show is an exception because the previous years they've had 1,400 stalls. This year they've got 1,300 stalls. They decided to make it a little bit smaller. They did that by design. We need to add on top of the existing rings 3 additional rings, one of them being a covered ring. And we need to make several infrastructure improvements. And as you know, the whole site is very old and needs a lot of work. Let's go to the next one. Another thing that the study said was that in $2,005, that the direct annual spending in this area, because of the annual events here, will grow from $15.5 million to $35 million. That the local hotel tax revenue, that's more than twice as much, obviously. Same here, more than twice as much, from $67,000 to $140,000, and that the state revenue tax should grow from $490,000 to $1 million.
What is direct spending on what?
People buying food, gas, lodging, just all the things they, shopping
Spending in
downtown,
town.
yeah, just where they're actually spending money.
Now,
Yep.
There's also some indirect that's been left out of that. That's just the direct.
this building is going to be on the other side across the path.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
You
I
will.
want to try and get through all the analysis part of it very quickly here. Again, that's $2,005. If you want to escalate that to $2,008, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. I'm not sure what that number is. We won't know until after 2008 is over with. Gas prices are running it up. Construction costs are running it up. Housing sales are running that number down. So I don't know what the answer is going to be. Okay? So in terms of development trends on exhibition centers, there's some things that we were considering, and I'm just going to highlight those for you. One is that, large exhibition buildings that have subdividable spaces that make a big statement on the site, that they're multi-use, they can be set up for anything at any given time, and some things can range from big shows like you saw before, to elephant affairs, to emergency plans. Of course, we're in a floodplain, I don't know how good it is. You might have some coastal issues that bring people inland for emergencies from a hurricane or something like that. And once the water goes away, then you can bring them in. Okay, another one. They're multi-purpose barns, and they're multi-purpose because the trend we're seeing is that portable stalling systems, not permanent stalling systems, are going in. Gives you the most flexibility, or gives the grounds the most flexibility. In fact, here, which is very typical, they would remove all of the stalling in all of the barns, stack up the materials, and then in the winter sell that space to store RVs, campers, and boats and things like that, and have an income for a period during snow and inclement weather that they normally would not be able to use the spaces for. So it's a good money generator. Let's go to the next one. Another thing we see is theming up the entire grounds, especially creating some kind of gate-like entrances to identify where people are supposed to flow into the site. And some identifying markers that create a theme or an image for the site, like the use of towers somewhere to either draw people to it or make the site visible from a long distance. So we interviewed that same week that I was here making this presentation to you, and I showed you this. We interviewed all these groups, and they were broken down into either equestrian or show people or event people or exhibition people. So there were a lot of groups that we brought in to interview. And we took all of their comments. We also took your comments down. Your comments included the following, and I'm actually spent time on this. There was some concern about increased year-round traffic. There was someone saying there was a need for a farmer's market, and I saw in the paper today that there's a farmer's market somewhere being set up. I forgot, some parking lot somewhere, but I forgot where it was. That they'd like to see as much green technology in the buildings as possible. They'd like to keep the agricultural feel of the site. They'd like to prevent event traffic on Venturesville Road. Suggested parking downtown using the shuttle service, and there was some discussion about that and how it had failed in the past. In some places it does not work well. It may be a time thing, but anyway, that was one of the items. We'd like to limit the parking to on-site during non-fair events, and so we worked very hard to try and do that. Requested a presentation. Here I am. You're going to get it anyway. And then the homeowners on Old Ferry said they would not like to see a big building next to them. Okay, so those were the basic comments. General comments that we heard from you and from other groups were basically that everyone likes the kind of feel, the county fair feel of the property, that during events there needs to be a lot more shade and could use some sprucing up and some landscaping. Better restrooms are pretty pitiful. Sorry, they are. And improved infrastructure capacity, not just electrical, but there's water issues and stormwater and sewage issues. And that lighting and the size of the arena is kind of difficult for the equine uses. While I was here that same week, I did a detailed analysis. Have I reviewed any of this with you before? Have any of you ever seen this? Yes, no, maybe? All right, well, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what I looked at was, regionally, where is the site? How do you get to the site once you get close? Where are people coming from? I think 85% of the people coming to the site actually come from the south on 91. And then the bulk of them exit on the north end of Bridge Street and come in and then hit Old Ferry Road. This is the site. Obviously, here's 91. How big is the site? We're working with 60 acres total, roughly, but really we're only talking about 50 acres immediately here. For a fairground that has the capacity of this one, we are typically seeing somewhere around 100 acres. So we had to be pretty creative the way we use the site. What does the site look like? Where's the property? What's the zoning of the property? What are the adjacent land uses? What's the vegetation look like? What type of topography and drainage issues are there? And there's one big drainage issue in that we have a big problem with the storm sewer system, which apparently has been discussed for over 25 years. We won't be here. We look at the solar orientation with the rising sun and setting sun, whether it's in the summer or the winter. We look at the normal prevailing winds on the site and how storms move into the area. We look at the views to the site and views away from the site. We look at the existing utilities, which Berkshire helped us with, Berkshire Design Group. Floodplain issues and any other restrictive development issues that we need to know about. Any site expansion potential, which there doesn't seem to be a lot. How the site functions with the fair and without the fair in terms of people getting on the site and getting into the site, the pedestrians, the cars, the parking. How do, once they get on the site, how do they flow? How do you service it once it's loaded up? What's the existing design alignment of it? What do the buildings look like? What are the fair use zones? And then what are the multiple go to the next one, the multiple non-fair uses, the Paradise Art Festival, where do people go, park, shows exist, how does the New England Morgan Horse Show set up? And then, what are the opportunities and strengths and issues of the site? And there's several, but among them are the site floods, stormwater management is a big issue. The whole site is very old and deteriorating and has had deferred maintenance for a very long time. And there's some code issues, and it's tough to get to the site if you don't know where you're going, because the signage is just a little bit, although you can see the site from the interstate. So what we did was, as I told you, we went away, we developed a bunch of alternatives, and we came and presented those to the development group and the fair board. And what we did in these alternatives was we took each one, we analyzed it, we wrote down the pros and cons, we showed how they could each be used. And what the both agreed to was this alternative 3. This is not the final master plan. But in this plan, the exhibition building is over here by the interstate. What we were asked to do was look at moving that building down this way because we have a large area that could be developed as a parking lot. One of the things we looked at was how parking works and where the people can get into the buildings. And then what we're talking about is just right up here by this building. So let's go to the next image.
With Route 9 and that.
Yeah.
Could you orient us on that?
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. I should have done that.
Yes, there is.
Here's the interstate.
Right is on the left side.
Sorry? Here's the interstate. Here is 9 coming in. This is Old Ferry Road. This is Fair Street. This is the administration building where we are. This is the existing arena building. Okay? All right. So let's move on because this was just one step.
Some people just got in here. Can we just see the map for a second more?
Sure. We'll need to leave 50 cents on the
Where
table.
is Route 9 on there?
On the left.
9 is over here.
This is not
Or
the master
bridge.
plan.
Yeah.
And there are people in the hall
Yeah.
outside, they
Oh.
should be told that there are seats actually in
Okay,
here.
let's go to the next slide and hold till they can get in. As long as we go ahead and move in, I apologize, I didn't realize it.
Thank you.
More over there?
There's a chair here.
We got a couple of seats over here.
There's one over here now.
Yeah,
Plenty over there, though.
there's a couple over
One
here.
over here now. Move
You
this.
can almost see. Sorry, we've been doing that all night. You want to sit over here? You know, if we had this used exhibition building, it does have meeting space in it, like, would be bigger than this. That the Morgan Horse folks would not be using at the moment, so this could have worked. It was tough getting
The
it.
new,
We have a couple more chairs over here.
the new exhibition building would not be original.
No, the breakout rooms would not be necessarily.
There's another chair over here.
So
One
do I.
chair?
All right, so we went back home with the instructions to improve that plan I just showed you. And there were reasons why they didn't like the other plan. So we said, well, we'll try and solve those problems and make sure we're picking the right one that we've done our job completely. So let's go to that. So we took that plan and shifted this down as we were instructed to, and looked at redeveloping it. We looked at placing the building over to the west side. We looked at placing the building here, but keeping the red stripe zone that you see there is a parking area that also is where the carnival sets up during the fair.
Where is the building we're in right now?
The building you're in is right here.
Okay.
Here's
Where's the
fair.
existing,
Here's the interstate.
where's the existing Butler building now in this drawing?
The arena building is
Yeah.
right here.
All right.
Here's the arena building. We're in this building. This is the green field next to us. All right. So what we did was, again, if you go to the next one, we identified all the pros and cons for each of the 3 sites. We did an analysis that showed how the fair could lay out, how the Morgan Horse Show could lay out, how a big exhibition could be going on, how it could be laid out if there were multiple events going on the site. We talked about traffic, we talked about impact to the neighborhood, we talked about many things on each one of these schemes at both levels. What both groups ultimately agreed to was that concept A, which is the one they asked us to develop, was the right idea. If we go to the next slide, this is concept A. So-
What's the diagonals up there?
This is a gravel parking lot. The red represents where the carnival could set up during the fair, which makes it highly visible from the interstate, and moves it back away from the residential area. Okay? And I'm going to get into more detail about how all of this layout works.
Is that where there's stables now?
Yes, you can see them lightly underneath here. All the horse barns are along this back road, along here.
So the midway would be over here,
The
on the
exact,
backside.
the existing track, this is on the existing track right here. The grandstand, the new grandstand proposed is in the same location of the existing grandstand roughly. The track, you can barely see it underneath here, comes all the way around right here. And it loops back around right there, right there into the, okay? To give you an idea where everything is. So here's the existing grandstand. Here's all the little exhibit buildings lined up along the road, along Fair. Here we are in the maintenance building. This is the existing arena building and the two existing Morgan horse barns, which we're proposing to keep.
Where's Prospect Road? Is that the
Prospect Road is this right here.
running right along the former horse barns? That's where the new.
The new building is, yes, in this back corner, in the corner, right over here from this building.
Where's the old horse barn?
Yeah, right. Here's the grandstand, here's the covered shed for the parimutuel bedding, and this is the corner of the property. I'm going to show you a 3D view of the site, so it'll make a little more sense when I get to that. I just like to tease you a lot while I'm doing this. Okay, so what we were instructed to do with this plan was, okay, go refine the master plan. There were some things architecturally we wanted to do to the building, so we went ahead and took it. We'll go ahead and move on to the plan, the actual master plan. And this is it. It's almost identical. There's some minor revisions to it. But this is the way it generally lays out. Improve 3 lanes along this road. The existing gate remains that goes in past the arena building. Existing gate remains. New gate, there's a gate here, but we developed a new actual gate structure and restroom building that provides a main pedestrian spine through the site. We have an exhibition building here, paved parking here, gravel lot here, reorganized rings for the new grandstand.
Is the old grandstand being torn down?
Yes, and I'll just go ahead and talk about that. The existing old grandstand is basically an original grandstand that was moved to the side, was rotting, was rebuilt, was added to on both sides, a new roof was put on it, and it just kept being cobbled together. And right now, it is so far from meeting any type of fire safety code or ADA code that it would be cheaper just to rebuild a new one under new guidelines. American Disabilities Act, where you have to provide accessible seating at different levels.
Where would the exhibition buildings be for handicraft or anything that now are going this
There's a
way?
4-H in there.
4-H.
building.
Yeah, on the, along
The
the,
existing buildings right here, you mean?
Oh,
They
already?
remain.
Yeah.
They remain.
What about
Okay,
the
well,
farm?
let me go ahead and do the presentation, and and you can ask
I
more
see what
details
you-
later. I'm going to show you a lot of stuff here, so let's go ahead and get through it. So we have 3 new horse barn structures. We've identified, because part of the program for the fair was to say that they could set up 175 or more stalls, but that they wanted to have permanent buildings that could hold at least 550 stalls. So we have 3 100-stall barns that have wash racks, restrooms, and office space in them. We have 1 large multi-purpose livestock building that replaces all that old dairy barn stuff that's very inefficient and dangerous. We have a covered ring that has bleacher seating, and then it has restrooms and concession space underneath it. We have various rings scattered around that sometimes are warm-up rings, sometimes they are actually show rings, depending on who's using them and what they want them for. Of course, the existing arena building and the existing 2 Morgan horse barns, and the existing maintenance building.
you said they needed 550 and you have 300 in those 3 buildings?
I have 300 here,
Where are the
about
other-
220, 230 over here, and then we actually can install in a couple of these other buildings if we need to. We exceeded the requirements for a permanent building, and we actually have, when you put in the 3 barns, you can get almost, I think, a little over 800 on site. Now, the Morgan Horse people need 1,400, and we did a special layout for them to show them where they could put tents. So we'll get to that in just a minute. That, we have, there's a pedestrian gate that's used only during the fair here, but we propose improving it, putting a nice gate structure in there. So we have a gate structure here, 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 and here.
Where would the amusement company be?
They would set up on this gravel
They would be in
parking
the
lot.
back.
Yes, and I'll show you that in just a minute. I'm gonna get to that.
The 3 rings, you said there were 3.
Oh, 3 new rings.
Right.
They wanted to increase the rings from 5 to 8. There are 8 shown on here. There's 1, which is existing ring building, 2, the covered ring, 1 which needed to be covered. So here's that. 3, 4, 5, 6, now 7, and I missed one. Dressage. Hey, thank you. Okay. Yes, sir.
So that pedestrian ring, pedestrian gate remain primarily a pedestrian gate,
Yeah, and it'll probably only be used during the fair.
and then that other.
Because we have people who filter in from the
And
neighborhood.
the other entrance off of Bridge Street would remain as a service road.
Service road
Not
only.
used as a main.
No, in fact, we're proposing to improve the interchange here, traffic lights, turn lanes on the road, and then 3 lanes. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm
There, okay.
Here,
yeah,
I'm sorry, I was
yeah.
looking at you, not at where I was pointing.
Yeah.
And 3 lanes over here, 3 lanes up here, so that, during a major event, you can have 2 lanes in and 1 out, and then switch it over to 2 out,
Right.
during those major events.
Are you gonna talk about the decision to replace grass lawns for parking with both concrete and gravel? It seems like that will keep the area.
You mean asphalt?
The asphalt over at the lower one.
Yeah,
And then
or-
up there
yes.
where you're doing the fair, turning that into gravel is also, isn't that going to keep the area up some and take away some of the beauty when people aren't using it?
It will, I agree with you, but the issue here is that we're on a very wet site that's in a floodplain, and it makes the site unusable. And the Morgan Horse Show is okay, they're not real happy, but they're okay with it because they're used to getting dirty. But when there's an event like the Paradise Art Exhibit Show, and there's people trying to get through this parking lot in high heels, it does not work for that show, and that show does poorly in those years. So it's a big issue, and on top of all that, we're cramming a lot of event space in here that we're making multi-usable. We actually are going to be parking on the show rings because it is a hard enough surface that we can pack down and park on to maximize our utilization of the property. I mean, when I get into that, you'll see we use every inch of this property.
Was there other kind of material that you could use instead of concrete?
Well,
That would, take care of the muddy problem?
Well, there are some alternatives there. There is, like Grasscrete is a product, which basically you set up the concrete pattern, backfill it with gravel, and then you sow it with seed. And it makes it structurally sound, but that's very expensive. And there's also drainage issues, so you might consider putting in, of course, concrete. But at this level, all I've done is identify the areas and generally what the materials need to be.
Right.
I'm not getting into construction documents or details like that.
What about
Okay.
traffic on Bridge Street? How would that impact the traffic that's already talking?
One of the things that we talked about was that we were trying not, this is a dangerous intersection and it's got a lot of residential, so we were trying to keep the maximum amount of traffic over here as possible. One of the things we also talked about was that during an event, we would like, rather than to stack on Bridge Street for people to wait to load in, we'd rather bring them all the way into the site and then stack them on these roads temporarily while we're loading the parking areas and get them off of Bridge Street. Now, we don't want to create safety issues or access issues for the local people, and that's why we're talking about the 3 lanes and other things like that. Let me go on to the next diagram so we start showing some of the a little more detail about these. This is the exhibition building, and if you'll hit it one more time, what it shows you is that there's actually 2 access points into the building, and this is sort of the public corridor spine with access to the main exhibition building space, the exhibition space, which is a high bay, concrete floor, volume, no columns, that can be subdivided into 2 or 3 smaller areas. And then on the front piece of this building is the support space, which includes new fair office, a couple of pairs of restrooms at either end of it, storage facilities, breakout meeting rooms. There's probably, we planned for 5 meeting rooms, a little bit larger than this. And the way that it functions is that, you know, if you have one big event, you park everywhere on the grounds and you enter the 2 areas. If you have 2 separate events going on, and you put the divider wall in, and you park one on this lot and bring them in this entrance, and you park the other on this lot and bring them in the other entrance. So there's a lot of flexibility in the way that, the way that it gets set up. The next diagram is just a little more detail of the multi-purpose horse barns. And again, these can be set up, and you can look at the next one. These can be set up with banks of back-to-back and on the end 10 by 10 stalls, and the yellow represents the corridor that services them. But when those stalls are taken down, it's just one big clear space, and it can be used for storage or other events or expositions, whatever it's needed. A little bathroom building right there, by the way. And then this is the reworked inner lawn area where this existing racetrack now comes way out here and wraps all the way back over here. This is what's required for a tractor pull. That's a 400-foot segment for a tractor pull. The new show ring, and although there's a line shown here, what it really does is this is the new show ring. It comes all the way down to here. Fencing can be moved, gates can be put in where they need to be used. And then part of the Morgan Horse Show uses this space over here. And then we got either a warm-up ring for this or show rings, whatever they need to be. Okay. The next diagram focuses in on the open-sided ring, and it has in it, the actual ring, the bleachers looking on the ring, and then the concessions and restroom and office spaces, the cells going down. So basically, you come in, you either buy concessions or go to the restroom, and you come in the middle and go into the bleacher area. All open-sided. Typically, we'll have an 8-foot wall along this edge to block the lower view in case there's activity out here, but we like it open so there's a lot of breeze. And if you look, we've oriented all the buildings in a north-south orientation so that the solar orientation is good for this type of building, because that's one of the green things we were trying to accomplish. And also, because these are open and we want to have a lot of natural ventilation, we have a ridge along the top of them to allow the ventilation to take place.
So just out of curiosity, how are they good for that? How is the north-south facing good for those buildings if they're open buildings?
Well, because the way that we have the seating, as the sun sets in the west, for example, in this case, the sun is behind everybody in the interior building, which is a full height building space right here, blocks that western sun. Morning sun's not so much a problem. It's really
These-
So it's not getting
these
sun
were-
from that.
it's not getting wet, I'm sorry.
So it's more for not getting the sun.
That's right. That's part of it, and to minimize how much sun gets up underneath the roof in this case.
You could also do
These would,
photovoltaics for the electricity.
These are the cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, and whatnot.
Whatever it needs to be. It's just
Yeah.
it's a very large
Both of
showroom.
them, on both sides
Yeah.
of the.
Now, this is a multi-purpose building also, and this would be the multi-purpose livestock barn. And it could be set up with stalls of any size, 5 by 5 or 10 by 10, depending on what's shown in it. The idea is that all the dairy cattle, all the sheep, all the pigs, all get segmented within this building, and there's little show rings in it during the fair.
Is it concrete underneath it?
Yes,
Yeah,
concrete.
On
the
the
Now,
problem
the
now,
horse barns are dirt, but this would probably be a concrete.
This is-
Yes.
because that's the problem right now, the dirt floor is the existing.
Yeah.
What about for musical events?
Yeah, it would work actually. This is an aerial view, and it would work because you can set up out there now. With it open-sided, the acoustics aren't great, but it would work.
And what about seating? Approximately
It's
how many?
about 1,000
Is that all?
in the bleachers, but if you set up a show in it, you would put seating on the bottom, and so you could obviously increase it by another, 1,000 to 1,500.
But sometimes we need 10,000, like for warp.
This is not a
warp tour.
10,000 capacity site.
Just the big building.
Yeah. Yeah, you could set up in a large building.
Right.
That's true, but acoustics in a middle building gets a little bad.
Where would
Is there-
this ought to be able to put the ox and horse draw competition
Yes.
under cover.
Yeah, that could work. That's
Was
correct.
there any
So-
place you could set up a stage, an outdoor stage, and have just standing in front of it? Or-
Sure, Yes, there is. In fact, we talked about that, and I'll show you where that is in the fair side. Okay, I'll show you an example where you do. Now, this aerial view that you're looking at is looking from the west across the site towards the interstate. So you're looking, so here's where we are right now in the administration building. This is the existing arena building. This is the existing Morgan horse barns. You can see Old Ferry as it pops underneath the interstate there. And you see Fair Street here. And again, we're looking at interchange and improving this, hopefully to 3 lanes the whole length of it. And all that will come off of the city side. I know that question's going to come up. So, you know, generally, as people approach and come into the site, what will happen is, you know, you can peel off and park over here, peel off and park here. If there aren't, you know, there rarely be tents set up here. Mostly, this is a parking lot, where you can bring people on around and then start loading the parking lot over here.
Well,
This,
well, the carnival event you set up, the back?
right there.
Way,
Interstate.
way from the noise.
Yes, that's right. We have a tower feature that acts as a focal point so you can see where you are within the entire site. Of course, this is the covered ring. This is the livestock building, the horse barns, the exhibition building, and then there's the grandstand and existing traffic. Moving the site around, I'm going to show you views all the way around the site. This is looking at the site from above the cemetery in a northeasterly direction. And again, you can see the exhibition building, this building right over here, with the paved parking lot, and the covered ring and the existing arena building.
Where would be the RV parking for a show like this?
It would be around the perimeter on the fence line. A lot of where it is, we're going to add an additional 75 spaces or so to bring it up to about 300. Bruce, was that right? Did you bring us up? You left the building, and I was like,
I'm here. Yeah, about 300.
yeah, so I'll bring it up to about 300 or so. And they'll be scattered around, mostly around the edges.
What about the playing fields and the parking lot? You're saying it's the
Playing fields, I'm
The,
sorry.
on the other side, the city side, where you're gonna
Yeah,
increase?
yeah,
That's
right.
not effective.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
The master planner here knows that. We talked about
All the street widening and sidewalks and things would happen in the right of way of the street itself. not
So
on
there'll
the
be a
city.
sidewalk put on
both sides of Old Ferry. And on the
Fair side.
fair side
Fair
of
Street.
Fair Street.
But isn't that where the 3 lanes gonna go in, where
There's room to do all of that.
And so.
You'll see a picture of it in just a moment.
So when the games are taking place and this, and all these events are happening, there'll be a lot of traffic there. Right? There's gonna be a lot of
Coming into the
traffic.
site, yes.
Yeah, and leaving too,
Well, there is today.
parents coming in and out, plus everyone else, but. If you considered that, I'm assuming, you have considered that
Yes.
traffic.
Now, a lot of the additional events that take place on the grounds, and I think we talked about this a little bit, proposed in CSNL study is winter use of this building right here to make it more year-round here. Okay. So we're accommodating the existing warm weather month facilities, but we're adding a lot more events in the winter when there's no traffic from those other events.
What about a bike lane on the perimeter roads?
You're out of luck.
With 3 lanes, I'm not sure there will be room.
Okay, did you hear that answer?
No.
With 3 lanes, there may not be room within the existing right of way.
There gonna be sidewalks there also?
Yes.
This is cross path back here.
The cross path is such a narrow,
Well, it's-
little road.
It's proposed to be widened.
It's gonna be widened and it's a real, near triangle congestion.
Yes,
There's a lot of traffic.
It is, yes. But the proposed improvements hopefully will make it function better.
Could be a dangerous intersection.
The fence will go away, it's currently along Washington Road, is that correct?
No, we will maintain that fence. Well, there's a piece of it here that we probably get rid of on this end. We'll need to have fencing over here to link in around this lot. So the northern end of it would still have fencing.
I know I come and go to my home on Little Road.
Through here.
Yeah, right on the easy things.
And you probably splash through that water spot like I did very slowly.
Yeah, but when there's any event, there's a lot of traffic, it really is congested coming in there. And also for emergency vehicles, which is the
Well, that's part of what we were considering, why the 3-lane might be better, because we could open up a lane.
On Old Ferry.
Well, ferry, we don't want to
How
let this in.
many lanes is gonna be on,
2 full lanes.
so
As
it's
opposed
sort
to
of double
20
the
feet.
size, and then,
How about a sidewalk or like on that back road?
There is a sidewalk on the fair side.
On the back road.
On this
Yeah,
road,
across the
I don't think we planned for anything back there.
But there's no lighting or anything
But-
back there now.
no.
So I can imagine it's way much safer.
Yeah.
Are all your utilities going to be underground, except obviously for the lights that have to be above ground?
I think that's generally the
Everything
idea.
is good.
Yeah. What's that?
That's what.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. You went ahead and leaned on it, fell asleep apparently. This is a view from the northeast, looking above the interstate towards the site. And again, here's the exhibition building. This is the office. Here's the existing arena. And you would come in to go to that existing arena in the Morgan Horse Farms. So the next one.
See, the playing field
Now-
is just to the right of it.
Yeah, right, here's all the existing playing fields. And, you know, the county, the city bought an additional piece of property to add another field, so that's underway. This is, we showed this both with tent setup and with the typical, this is normally gonna be an open lot. So, that would be used for parking for a major event here or then over here sometimes. Okay. Moving on around the site, getting down on the interstate, this is it with it set up with tents, the next one's with it with typical parking, and then the next one is looking at it from the northwest, and here is a view of the street with the sidewalks on it.
It's looking south on the field.
Yes.
Playing field
South,
over this way.
and the playing, all the fields are over here, and the park sign is right
What kind of trees are you planting then?
there. Green ones. I don't know, we're just identified that, actually, these are existing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Those are existing. We just identified that we want certain trees for certain reasons.
So your 3-lane road only goes down, what, 75 feet?
Well, that's what we have initially priced, but in further discussions, we've been told that, you know, it'd probably be a good idea to look at putting in 3 lanes the entire lane. And so, and we don't disagree with it, I mean, it's just another $1 million, so, you know. Sure.
That's all.
I saw a tentative hand go up, yes.
Sure.
Well,
there
I'm
to get
not
it.
gonna wanna talk about this, but you say you're planning, when do you guys talk about trees?
So do we have to talk about trees?
You wanna start with tree, you wanna talk to a landscape architect about trees?
No,
Okay,
when
you
in
said-
this whole
The
process.
realistic answer to that is, when this gets to a point where there's actual drawings that are being done that are definitive of, you know, grading, drainage, planting, all of that stuff, when someone's proposing an actual building, the building plans come before the planning board, and then there'll be there'll be a planning board hearing, at which time all of the really finite issues get talked about. So,
And
yeah,
when could we also talk about, renewable energies in this plan?
same thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Did you say the midway would be set up in the parking area adjacent to the exhibition hall?
Yes, and I'll show you a diagram that shows that. This last view that we're going to show you is looking southward from the arena building, as if you're standing by the arena building, looking towards the existing exhibition building, and this is the existing museum building. You can see where we shortened the track way back, and we built the open-sided arena building. You can actually see the bleachers inside the building in there, and the ring that's in there.
Is that where concerts might be occasionally?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what programs are going to be there. Someone's just asking, can you have a concert in there? And I said, yes. And she said, well, how many can you seat? And I was guessing, the bleachers hold 1,000. You could probably set up another 1,200. So it'd be 2,200. Yes, sir.
I guess a question, how much of the existing facility would be demolished, and then how much in percentage would be new construction?
It's easier to tell you what we're keeping. And basically, this building, when the fair office moves out of it, it just maintains itself as a maintenance facility. This used to be an actual dairy barn, so they just built inside the dairy barn. This building remains. All of the, can you see this plan good enough to talk from?
Yeah.
All of these little exhibit buildings along Fair Street, all of those remain. And the arena building remains. Everything else, Morgan Horse Farms, thank you. Everything else gets replaced or removed.
What is the proposed
Oh, there's some
cost?
existing restrooms we keep,
What
not
is
the one
the
in the middle, yes.
Proposed cost of the project?
The total cost of the project, of everything here, including all the infrastructure and some off-site improvements, roadways and stuff like that, roughly $40 million. But it's a multi-phase development. It is not just the CSNL study. This is a full-bore master plan.
And this is how much money?
You didn't bring your checkbook tonight? Multiple sources. Multiple sources are being looked into.
Well, what time
So-
span?
The time span can vary depending on how quickly it can be funded. I mean, this could be a 10,
10 years,
15 year process. But to talk about the phasing of it, let's go through how the site gets used. And when I get back to the full master plan, I'll talk about how it can be developed, okay?
Could some of the grandstand and maybe a couple of the stable buildings be replicated
Yes.
to maintain
Well,
that?
actually,
I mean,
that was,
as they are now.
yeah,
Exactly.
one of the things we
Right.
talked about was that even though the grandstands have been cobbled together, there's a certain look to it, which was in our first slide. It's also in the last slide.
To
It has
look-
that arch type on the end,
Right,
the
the
nice
way
roof, the
hood
little
comes up, right.
judging piece that sticks out on top. And there's just some nice things about it, and we would like to see those replicated to sort of remember what
Maintain
the,
the
yeah.
historic.
Now, we want to improve the look of the buildings. We don't want just simple 2-bay deep racehorses, and we want to add that ridge band because we've got to get the airflow circulation moving like this on all those open buildings, those un-air conditioned buildings. And so there's some functional reasons why we need to do that. So there's things like that. Let me show you the uses of the site, and then I'll come back and talk about how it can, one way we can look at phasing it in. This is the way the fair would use the site. They would set up the midway in the northeast corner near the interstate. The beige, orangey color, whatever that is, represents general parking areas. The yellow represents the pedestrian circulation and eating areas. The pink represents entertainment, where this would be the demolition derby, the setup for it, and the tractor pull. The dark purple represents some of the entertainment pieces of it, the stages and the outdoor stages, and some of the children areas, so they're away from the midway. In fact, if you see, we've got the midway away from the livestock activities going on this end of the side. We have the show ring, the open-sided ring, which could be used for multiple things. It could be a show, a horse show or something, or it could be some small venue entertainment, depending on the need, depending on the day. It'll just be a flex space. And we're actually parking on some of the rings, and this is the whole livestock component, which is the various size animals set up in here. And then as the horses come in for their day, they might use some of this space. Exhibitions will be going on inside the building. The light blue represents outdoor exhibition space and meetings. Okay? For the Morgan Horse Show, we've identified multiple sites for tents that work good for them. This provides them with 1,600 or so, or 1,500 stalls, which increases them. They have some growth. One of the things I failed to mention on the previous one is we've identified the gates in blue and the restrooms in red. And there's actually restrooms in this building that can be opened up. For the Morgan Horse Show, because this is a little nicer space and they have a tendency to track things in, we might not let them use the restrooms in this building. But at the same time, they set up a tent that is a food tent, and we might allow them to come in this building, at one end of the building, and use it for that piece of it. It just depends on what agreement.
Do they need less parking than other events? Because you're taking
They
away
have
a lot of
they
parking.
have a different type of parking, and that is that, for the fair, you have a ton of people coming in who are visitors. For them, the people in the grandstand are the show people. You don't have a lot of people, they don't advertise it, a lot of people just don't come to it as an event. So their dualies and long trailers are all parked around the grounds in between the buildings. And you can look at it, you can see how they do it. So it is a different type of
The
one.
ring in the upper left-hand corner near Bridge Street, yeah, that one, what's surrounding it, what's the ring made out of? Is it still grass,
It's stone dust, and there's an existing ring there.
but it's surrounded by grass now, it looks like it would be surrounded by concrete, or there's
No,
trees
no,
around
no,
it?
no, no, that's not concrete. I'm sorry. There's not even, we don't even propose any concrete on site. What is hard pavement is asphalt.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
And
that's
then the rest
asphalt?
of it, most of it, a lot of it is the stone gravel.
The ring itself is stone dust, everything in white around it is grass.
Well, there's some stone dust over here too. The previous, the actual master plan shows it a little bit better. And we'll get to, it'll be at the end of this little sequence here. Okay, go to the next one. This is an example of how you set up for a major event in this, and conservatively, we figured there needed to be about 17.8, 18 acres worth of parking for a major exhibition in this building. And so traffic come in and enter in multiple sites to load it in quickly, and then the show going on. Yes, ma'am.
And, sorry, we already touched this, but how many people can fit into that building?
We made an assumption, and I can't remember the exact number of the occupancy, but I can tell you what we did. We said there's 80,000 square feet of show space in it. The range of occupancy is for setting up like this, and if it's done safely instead of the way that we did it, it's 7 square foot per person. If you set up banquet tables, the round banquet tables, it's 15 square feet per person. So we use 12.5 as an average to calculate the occupancy. Then by code, we are to provide 1 parking space per 3 people. And then you can park about 120 cars per acre, so I calculated 17.8 acres. So that, I went through those numbers together, and that's how we do it all over the country. in general.
So you don't know how many people, so.
I don't remember
You
how
don't
many
remember.
people.
Just divide
Yeah.
18,000.
I did run a number, but I don't remember what it is. I could do it backwards if you give me a calculator, that's the best I can offer. Okay, so, all right, so this is an exhibition, let's go to the next one. Multi-use, and it's very important for this type of facility to have more than one event on the site at the time, and so we loaded it up to show how do you handle multiple events on the site. And then the fair, as a manager, is the fair, I mean, not the fair, but the fair board, as managers of the site, are concerned, you know, how do we take care of, you know, multiple events on site? What do we do? And so, from a design standpoint, we loaded it up for Bear and said, this is what you would have to do. So, we're showing a partial show that's not using the whole building because we don't have enough parking to fill the building. We've also got an equine event going on in the arena. We're using the new barns and the outdoor showroom. And possibly using some of the outdoor space over here. And then we show a livestock event with the associated parking. The parking areas are calculated based off of the occupancy of the guests. So what do you do in this case? Well, we actually color-coded it so you can see when you have an event here and you're parking people here, you bring them in for the livestock show and direct them into these parking areas. For the equine, you either direct them to the guest lot or you send them around to the show lot back here. I had that backwards, guest lot or the show lot. And during the exhibition in the building, you can either park in here or as this gets blocked or fills up. And that's another thing, another reason why we like the 3-lane. Let's say this lot's not full, but it's starting to back up because they're having trouble loading it. Close this gate and send them around to the next one. To keep traffic moving, that's the whole point. It's all about management of the vehicles. So then you can load it up that way. We did another view of it where we sort of rearranged things and thought of different ways of using the site. And that, we did this for all the previous attempts of design that we did. The alternatives and then the refined. And we went through this whole process for each one of those to help the groups make the decision to pick the site that they picked. And we talked a lot about a lot of issues. So let's go to the plan.
Can I
have
ask
a
a question about?
Well, I'm going to do questions now. So that I was trying to get here so I could answer
Okay.
the questions. Okay, so what's your question?
About 6,600.
Well, it's kind of a projection
Yes.
type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, with peak oil and with people buying, and with the oil being as expensive as gas being as expensive
Yes.
as it is, with people buying smaller and smaller cars, hopefully, and with more public transportation, hopefully, and more people using bicycles and that sort of thing, Was that at all a consideration when we went into this whole thing about parking, how much parking you would need, and how would that change your plan?
It wasn't, and the reason why is because in the 70s, we did make the mistake of starting to size down parking spaces, and we've regretted it ever since. There are garages that are practically not usable now. They will be usable in the fairly near use future, but by then they'll have to be replaced because of they've deteriorated so far. But
You're talking about
the
like
thing
parking
is,
garages?
anything, it doesn't matter. Parking lots, they had to be redesigned because a lot of subcompact spaces were developed where you couldn't get the larger vehicles in. There's always going to be larger vehicles that need to access the space, and for a facility like this, you're going to have tractor trailers and people pulling trailers coming in here a lot. Will the parking go down because of the gas price, and will the public transportation help? We hope so, because the site is really a lot smaller than it should be.
That's a good question. Do you have bus, deplaning locations? Because if you have buses coming in for some of those trade shows, do you have a place where a bus can?
A bus we could actually pull the buses into the site to let them unload, or we
Right.
could take them to certain areas, certain lots, and have unloading areas. I don't think we want to keep them on the public streets. We need to get them in to unload because they take a bit of time to unload, especially if it's the larger ones that can hold 55 people. It takes a bit of time to get them unloaded.
Right.
And then also, I would rather have them in a place where it's one of the whole things that we have to deal with when we look at these type of sites is, what do you do with your visitor who is a pedestrian once they get out of their car, and you're trying to bring cars in where those people are, and you're trying to service the building. So we tried to have cars flow in, stop, and then cars flow in, people get out, and then they float into the site, and they circulate in the site. Service is kept away from those areas as much as possible.
That was my next question.
Yeah, and so we do a service perimeter. We get people to park and move into the interior. And so we are very conscious of the safety issues. There's also safety issues that we have to be concerned about dealing with livestock and what happens if an animal gets loose. Now, you're probably not interested in all that, but there's a whole level there that we have to deal with in internal fencing and gating. Yes, sir.
You just said that the site is smaller than you would like it to be.
Yeah.
Why is that, and what size would you think
Well,
it should be?
for
what
the
uses?
type of facility that you would see comparable across the United States, you would see almost 100 acres for this size facility, and we're working with 50. 55. So, or 55. And part of that is why you see during the really major big events, the Fair Board has to lease property adjacent for parking. That's the downside. So one of the things you see us doing on this site that we would normally not do on the site is we do park on those showrooms. Typically you don't like to do that, but there are ways that we can manage that so that it can be rolled down flat for parking services. And we actually do, in the use zones, as you recall, I showed parking all in this zone here. And the idea is that, okay, we've got the gravel, we'll pack it, and we'll allow them to park in the lawns when it's not too wet. If it gets too wet, we just can't park on the lawns. Yes, sir.
What are comparable uses and these larger sites?
You mean in terms of?
I'm sorry, I came in late to the
No, that's okay.
presentation, but from what I could pull out from your presentation, it seems like you have space for a large multi-use building,
Yes.
a Morgan Horse Show, and some possible other events, and I'm wondering what's projected to be in the large multi-use building
okay.
and the other multi-use spaces.
That was all predetermined by a study, an economic feasibility study that was done by Convention Sports and Leisure, CSNL. And we based our entire design off of their economic study. We're planners, not forecasters. But we do have experience with this, so much experience with this type of facility. We understand more of what the needs are to make it flexible. So there's some increases here. Yes, sir.
Well, parallel to Bridge Street, next door to the livestock ponds are to
Bridge
Bridge
Street.
Street. There's an area that's a grassy strip that's outside the fences of the fairgrounds. That,
are you talking about?
Yeah, where people sometimes exercise their horses. Oh, yeah.
Right here?
Yeah, is that going to remain an unfenced grassy area, or is that going to be fenced in now?
I didn't get into that much. I didn't get into that much detail, I'll be honest with you. I mean, there's a stream, there's a little creek bed back there, isn't there?
I thought
Isn't
that
there?
creek bed was on people's properties, or is it just at the edge of the fairgrounds? But there's a fairly wide strip of grass
Yeah.
that's like,
It is a
Unofficial
space
parking.
that could be used, I mean, right now, we're actually showing it as a grass space with the gravel service road piece not really extending beyond it.
I was curious about the placement of the fence because it's.
Yeah, and there's a little buffer there that we were trying to maintain.
It's a thoroughfare now that takes you off of Bridge Street if you're walking. It's a good way to walk between those two sections.
Yes, ma'am.
So is the elevation of any of the buildings going to be increased? Any of the new buildings? I mean, are we gonna see what are the elevations?
The elevations can't change that much because of compensatory storage. So they'll be generally in the same place that they are now.
And correct me
Is
if
that
I'm.
correct?
So,
Did I answer that right? Yeah. This is compensatory.
so what you're saying is that you took, someone did an economic study, you took that information and maximized the use to fulfill the desire of to generate revenue for the city. Is that basically what this
Generally,
is?
but to generate
I know I'm putting
revenue,
it-
we took their economic feasibility study, said, this is what the market demand can handle in terms of size of building, and this is what you need to build, and at what quality. We took that information and created that space, but on top of that, the Fair Board had some issues with things that were never addressed in that study, including replacing all of these old livestock dairy barns, the major infrastructure issues, and all the things that made it escalate up to the $40 million total development, 2008 dollars that we were talking about. That's not an uncommon number for a facility that's doing this type of, long or short-term improvements. Yes, sir.
So I guess this is a follow-up to questions asked earlier before, but,
Yeah.
I mean, another aspect of the economic environment, the changed economic environment that we're seeing in the last couple of years, like increasing gas prices, is that the economic factors that were taken into account in the original assessment of what the city can make and what kind of uses there are going to be in the future, those themselves may have to be reassessed. I mean, it's not just a matter of changing. So from your end, there's the question of how much parking do you need, and that's the question that's asked earlier, but there's also the question of, for example, are people still going to be driving around these massive Morgan horse trailers in the same way 10, 15 years from now?
They're the ones with the dough, they'll still be driving.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
The Morgan Horse Show is merely one tenant.
No, I'm just giving an example.
Or one
Just-
event.
People afford to go to the fair.
Right.
Or will
right.
people
Are
what?
people gonna be able to afford to utilize this space?
Right. No, I'm just giving an example. That wasn't. I mean, it's
Right.
not about the Morgan Horse Show per se, but it's really a question of: do we need to reevaluate
Well,
the?
it may need to be reevaluated, but the study did sort of limit it, say that it was not a huge region that they were taking in. It's really a short region. I mean, we're not covering the entire state. Either, so.
No, I'm not. And I know this isn't your
Yeah.
department. I mean, it's not that it's not your department, obviously, but it seems as if an economic plan or economic factors that were taken into consideration, whatever, 2 years ago, might actually be very different even today.
And that will be a question for CSNL. Because there's some other questions that the group has for them anyway. Yes, sir?
Do you have a design for the grad school?
No, we just identified where it needed to be. No architectural drawings in this.
Not yet.
This is a master plan to help plan for the development so that as projects are funded, we know where they go and so we don't do stupid things like put major utilities right where we're going to be putting a building. So that's the intent.
Do you have a prioritized phasing in as budget comes in?
There's a little bit of one, and I'll tell you what I do know today, okay? This exhibition building, or at least a majority of it, is of prime interest because of the study, okay? If this building needs to go, and what the group is hoping is that construction can begin in 2010, which means that they're trying to get the funding to do the architectural and engineering drawings to get it priced out so that it can go to bid so that construction can start at that time. When this building goes in, what has to happen is all of the existing barns have to be torn down, okay? Well, if that happens, in order for the fairgrounds to continue to work, and please understand that the grounds must function the entire time of this construction, 14 to 18 months right here. During that whole time, the site has to continue to be operating because it has to generate the required revenue to stay open. So what that tells us is that these 3 barns had to be built before this is built. These are quick, easy, pre-engineered buildings. The portable pens, they are a system that you can buy from several vendors. So, I mean, it's not that difficult to do those. So, from a phasing standpoint, if this is a high priority, prior to the beginning of this project, probably a good idea, there's, you know, I told you the track comes along right here. I think the outer fence of the track is about where these buildings are right here shown. The idea is you could take down the 2 barns that are out here. Maybe it's over here. If you take this over here, you can take the 2 barns that are here down, go ahead and take out that part of the track and build these 3 before you ever start getting this other construction. And that keeps all of these 3 replace all of this stuff when it's torn down essentially. So while the construction's going on here for several months, you know, the rest of the site can be used. Another thing is that this parking lot could be paved right at the beginning of the project. So the displaced parking area could be over here while this construction is going on. So that's kind of what I think you have to do. If this is a high priority, we're probably going to have to do this pretty quick. The other thing is that a lot of these things here is just moving fences and gravel. So this is stuff that can be done anytime. It can be done next year for relatively minimal money.
What can be done next year? I'm sorry.
That's the gravel. For example, yeah, for example, all this stuff over here could be done. I don't know when it's going to be done. For example, that's easy. It doesn't affect anything else on the ground. So the idea, though, is that while this is going on, or while this construction project is going on, the rest of the site remains active. Yes, sir.
Did you do, or are you doing any of the studies for drainage, the volume that's increasing here, paving, and what are the drains, and where is that drainage going?
Actually, Berkshire Design Group did some preliminary studies for the on-site drainage. So they looked at the existing impervious and the proposed impervious. They looked at the compensatory storage. Actually, all of the buildings have been surveyed for their compensatory storage volume to make sure we can even do this project. Can you believe we did something first, right? I'm amazed with myself. I had nothing to do with it. That was done by other people. But so there are actually, all of this has been looked at in very general terms. There's some off-site issues that have not been thought about, or not been resolved, I guess I should say.
They've been thought about, they're just not resolved.
Yeah, they're not resolved. So what do you do with the stormwater? We have a major blockage up here that's been there for over 25 years. It's an issue that we don't know how that's going to get resolved. There was an idea of maybe we could get DOT to allow it to go a different direction. I'm not sure where it is, but they're not even talking to us about any of that. So
Would that be a major financial aspect of this?
Can I just add, Terry Anderson from the city, the DPW and the mayor's office have actually been working on this simultaneously to all the planning that's been going on. This is, the drainage issue in the neighborhood has been a many-year issue. And the DPW has been analyzing all the different various solutions to it. Right now, actually this week, they have contractors out there that are cleaning out the drain lines and looking at places where they can plug leaks and how they can improve it in its existing condition. And then also looking at long-term upgrades to the system. And there are lots of different options that they're considering. So that is on the table. It is something that the city is looking at. And it will be, it's a neighborhood issue that has to be addressed.
And if I may, Terry, both the storm drainage off-site and the roadway improvements would be the city's responsibility. And the fair board would take care of everything on the fair site.
But presumably the 18 acres of new parking would be contributing additional stormwater, which would be the responsibility of the city to deal with.
No, that's actually not true. Any additional impervious would be compensated for on site, so the amount of water leaving the site would be the same.
I just want to clarify that the offset improvements are public infrastructure improvements, but they would not be coming from local taxes, we would be applying for grants for those projects.
So that large blue area in the northwest corner is a retention use?
That's
That's
the
an existing
existing.
structure, and we had it highlighted in the plan to show the existing. The idea is that the new ones would be scattered about the site, along ditch lines in various areas in any way that we can economically store it, maybe some even improvement. And part of it is that if the off-site improvements can't be made fast enough, maybe there's a way of over-designing the system on-site to overcompensate for the water until it's time to be repaired or taken care of.
Impervious concrete might be a good choice on the site, but it is stormwater storage as well.
It could be. There's some drawbacks to it in this case because if we're going to have livestock on it, sometimes the manure is one of the worst things to work with because not only does it smell bad, but it's got a lot of ultra fines in it and the ultra solids in it that do not dissolve. And so what do you do with them? You can't flush them. You can't throw them in the river. I mean, they're really a big problem. So there's a settling tank requirement and all sorts of different things that are required in our business. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what about the sewage? Talking about stormwater, but what about sewage?
Can you answer that?
Same thing that we're doing now with everything. Sewer capacity actually here is okay.
What about composting the manure? It seems like
Actually, it's
ridiculous
spread.
waste.
They do currently. Well, in the overall plan, you saw that if you go on out Old Ferry Road past the airport, there's some property out there in the middle of all those fields. Some of that property belongs to the fair. What they do during a major equine event during the fair is they haul all of the manure over there. They sell some of it, and what they don't sell, they actually till into the ground out there. So it does get used, essentially. Let me get this up right here, yes.
I'm wondering if the process of selecting the architect and engineers has started, and also if your firm will be part of the process throughout the design.
It has not started anyway, and then once the process starts, at that time we'll look at whether or not we might try and go for it. Yes. If we do, we'll be teaming up with all local people like Workshop. Yes,
Say
sir.
something about the process from here, the next step. Now that first we did the feasibility analysis, and from there, then we did the master plan. The next phase is to do the business and financial plan. Basically, take this master plan and figure out what is the operating analysis to make it function properly and be economically feasible, and how are we going to fund the development of the project, and over what period of time will that take place. And then after that piece is done, and part of that will be more detailed construction cost estimates, and a final engineering design of the property. And from there, then that would be then brought to the city permitting. And right now, we're in the process of trying to raise the money to do that next phase of the pre-development analysis. So we're hoping that we can do that in the next year and get that work underway.
22 minutes to get through it.
In that next
Yeah.
phase, that's when you
Probably
decide who the
15
engineer
minutes.
that will have to be called.
That will be decided as part of the full construction planning phase. There will be separate architectural and engineering firm hired to do that, the site, the individual site plan, the detailed site plan. The Fair Association.
How much would the feasibility study
It's
cost?
about 6,600 people.
How much would the feasibility study cost?
How much did it cost?
No, the one you have to get done now.
What are we estimating for that, do you know?
Well, it includes the business plan, the financing plan, the construction and construction, is that, it's 35,000.
And who pays
I think it
that?
might even be more than that. I think it's at least 50,000.
And where's that come from?
Fair board.
They're gonna be
Fair.
and possibly grants.
And the city has been very, very good about helping this process along. The city's gotten grants from the state, with the chamber as well, which have paid for much of this work.
As well as donations that, excuse me, come in from the Fair Association members that be part of this as well.
got one more question on 64, the drainage material. I know they're looking at the William Street roof, drums in the neighborhood. Would that be a this water
Too small.
on this site?
The William
Too
Street
small.
Road is the
Right, as it
drainage.
is now,
Yeah.
but if we're looking for grant money to increase the size of it, what if we don't get that grant?
Well, that's probably the most expensive route. Right now, the DPW is analyzing trying to evaluate how much of the problem is blockages in the system, how much of it is it because it's undersized, and what are the alternatives? Is there another drainage system we can tap into in addition to that, rather than reconstructing, because it's going to be quite expensive to do that. So at this point, until we finish cleaning out the system and videotaping it, the DPW won't really have enough information to figure out what is the best option.
So that's a last sort of option.
Well, it's simultaneous. I mean, it's something that has to be done regardless of what happens with the redevelopment. It's a current issue for the neighborhood. So it's an ongoing project for the DPW.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. King?
I've gotta get out of here in about 10 minutes.
Mr. Rutger?
Well,
Yes, sir.
I just want to ask about noise abatement. Have you had any projections of noise or the increased noise? And if so, are you planning to do things that will abate that noise?
We haven't done any type of study as far as that goes, but what we did consider as a part of that, for example, is we did look at moving the carnival away from the neighborhood. We did choose not to put the building over here. We decided it was with too much of a big structure for a lot of residential. So we like the idea of it being visible from the interstate. We like the idea of the horse barns being visible from the interstate, and as you come in, we think they're significant and sort of signifying what the site is about. But to get back to the sound, really your big sound generator during the fair is going to be this, and this is already here. There's not going to be any change there.
Well, we have some unusual wind patterns here that carry noises in unusual ways.
Well,
here it goes this way, it can go this way, you know.
Well, but also topographically, you've got, the site comes down here, then it's this big expanse, and sound can bounce off of this interstate and can bounce off this backside and do some pretty hot things, or it can go back and hit the mountains even and come back towards you. It goes a long way, you're right. But we've not looked at anything like that.
Well, the other thing I'll say is that some of the uses will now be in covered buildings, and I think that would help with the sound. And I wanted to say something about the questions that have been coming up about concerts, because the original conceptual vision of how the facility would be used did not include a significant increase in concerts, because that was something in the neighborhood
We had our
was
problem
not
with that
interested
one
in
time.
seeing that. And really, the vision is to increase the cultural and agricultural shows that similarly are already taking place in the city. So there might be some concerts a few year like there are now, but it's not going to be a significant increase. It's not going to become a musical city.
It's just not designed for it anyway. We didn't even consider that.
You had one more question, sir?
yeah, whereabouts on the master plan would the food vendors be around between the covered ring and the exhibition halls down just about where
You
they
mean for the fair or
For the
what?
fair.
We would have to back up to that diagram, but basically they line all of the main pathways.
Yeah.
And they're in between these areas, and there's actually a whole zone of them. Somewhere along here, there's a little bit of a zone. We've identified a large eating area
Yeah,
here.
but that
Picnic
was
area.
what
But
is
all-
your infield?
This is all exhibitor along here
Yeah.
with shows behind it.
And space along with the existing farm museum and exhibition.
Yeah, no, those are down here. They still remain.
Yeah.
I mean, we just increased the exhibit space by 80,000 square feet. It's huge.
I'd like to thank Bruce Shawcross and the Board of Directors of the Fair for having this meeting. I'd like to thank Curtis for making such a fine presentation, and thank you all for... Sorry it was so warm and cramped.